What is up, everyone? My name is Joseph, and welcome back to Casually Competitive MTG, where it's our goal to bring you semi-competitive EDH gameplay content that is both fast-paced and entertaining. In today's video, we have some commanders that you've seen on the channel before, but also some that are brand new to the channel. In today's game, we have Orvar the All-Form, Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, Vadrok, Apex of Thunder, and Omnath, Locus of Creation. Now, just as a quick note, I mentioned this a few videos ago, but we are changing our editing or production process a little bit, so you may see some additional changes in this video. Continue to give us feedback if you have any. We really just want to find that balance between how long it takes to edit a video and what you guys are looking for in terms of visuals. Before we get into the gameplay, I want to mention that if you do like our videos and like what we do, you can support us by simply subscribing and liking the video if you do end up liking it. And if you're looking to support us in additional ways, check out our sponsor, Alter Sleeves, by clicking our affiliate link in the description. If you're looking for some cool looking art to cover your sleeves without having to get them physically altered, Alter Sleeves has the perfect solution for that. And they actually just recently started a Kickstarter where they're selling entire decks worth of sleeves where you can get some really unique looking frames for each of your cards in your deck. If you're looking for other ways to support us, we have a Patreon link in the description with some reward tiers we think you'll enjoy if you're interested in supporting us in that way. Also, if you're planning on buying cards in the near future, if you click on our TCG affiliate link before you do, you can directly help out the channel at no cost to you. And finally, at Flipside Gaming, if you use our code CasuallyMTG at checkout on eligible purchases, you'll not only get a 10% discount, but you'll also be helping out the channel. Now, with that all out of the way, let's get into the opening hands and deck introductions. Adam went first in this game, playing Vadrok, Apex of Thunder. This control-based deck looks to use mutate abilities in order to combo off. The most common loop for this deck being a Dockside Extortionist plus any bounce spell in combination with either a card like Vadrok or Lord Drakis in order to recur that bounce spell. The backup line in this deck is Underworld Breach and Brain Freeze. Adam's opening hand contained a Marsh Flats, a Windswept Heath, an Island, a Mental Misstep, a Drannith Magistrate, a Fierce Guardianship, and a Force of Will. Going next is Jordan, playing the 4-color Omnath, Locus of Creation. This is a value-based deck that looks to use creatures in the deck as well as Omnath's own ability to just generate value and card advantage throughout the game. The main win con in this deck is a Kiki Jiki or Splinter Twin line. Jordan's opening hand contained a Forbidden Orchard, a Gemstone Caverns, a Snow-Covered Plains, a Lotus Petal, a Natural State, a Deceiver Exarch, and an Oakhame Adversary. Going next is Nate, playing Orvar the All-Form. This is a mono-blue control list with some unique combo lines. There are a few different versions of this deck floating out there, but the one Nate built primarily focuses on getting value from his commander's ability by playing cards that target his creatures in order to copy them, all while controlling the board and looking for a win con involving either Isochron Scepter and Dramatic Reversal to generate infinite mana, or a line involving Treachery and a buyback spell. Nate's opening hand contained a Gemstone Caverns, a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, a Mana Crypt, a Soul Ring, a Chain of Vapor, a Swan Song, and a Rhystic Study. And finally, going last is Bill, playing Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. Bill's Kroxa deck is a combo deck that looks to grind down opponents' hands using discard effects like the one on Kroxa itself in order to slow the game down while looking for a win con involving Worldgorger Dragon and a card like Animate Dead in order to generate infinite mana, and then eventually winning the game by continually recasting his commander. Bill's opening hand contained a Smoldering Marsh, a Swamp, a Lotus Petal, a Vampiric Tutor, a Dark Ritual, a Feed the Swarm, and an Insidious Dreams. Remember, if you want to watch these games live, we stream them weekly to our Twitch channel, link is in the description. And now with the opening hands out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. Before Adam has a chance to take his turn, Jordan has a pre-game action and puts Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling a Lotus Petal. Then, still before Adam can take his turn, Nate also has a pre-game action and puts his own Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling a Chain of Vapor. Adam finally goes to his turn, draws a card, plays a Windswept Heath, and then passes to Jordan. Jordan draws, plays a Snow-Covered Plains, and passes the turn. Nate draws, and as his land, plays a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. He then for 1 mana casts a Soul Ring. In response to this, Adam pays 2 life to cast a Mental Misstep, successfully countering the spell. Nate then for 0 mana casts a Mana Crypt, and then taps his mana to cast a turn 1 Rhystic Study. In response to this, Adam casts a Force of Will, losing 1 life and exiling a Fierce Guardianship from his hand. The spell is successfully countered, and Nate, casting I think the most spells I've ever seen on turn 1, while ending the turn with almost none of those permanents on the battlefield, passes the turn to Bill. Bill draws, plays a Swamp, and then for 0 mana casts a Lotus Petal. He then goes to pass the turn to Adam, and on his end step, Adam pays 1 life to crack his Windswept Heath to get a tapped Hallowed Fountain to the battlefield. Adam then goes to his turn, untaps, plays an island as his land, and then for 2 mana, casts a Drannith Magistrate. The Drannith Magistrate resolves and Adam passes to Jordan. Jordan untaps, plays a Forbidden Orchard, and then goes to pass the turn to Nate. And in Jordan's end step, Bill pays 1 mana to cast a Vampiric Tutor, searching a card to the top of his library, losing 2 life. Nate then goes to his turn, untaps, loses his Mana Crypt trigger in his upkeep, and then for 1 mana casts a Mystic Remora. His spell finally resolves, and Nate, with nothing left, passes to Bill. Bill untaps, plays a tapped Smoldering Marsh as his land for turn, and then passes the turn to Adam. Adam untaps, plays a Bloodstained Mire as his land, and then cracks it, paying 1 life to find a Steam Vents to the battlefield, paying 2 additional life to have it enter untapped. He then taps his mana to cast a Narset Parter of Veils, not paying for Mystic Remora, so Nate draws. He then activates Narset to look at the top 4 cards of his library, revealing his own Mystic Remora and putting it to his hand. With nothing left, Adam passes to Jordan. Jordan untaps, plays a Snow-Covered Mountain as his land, and then taps his Forbidden Orchard, giving Nate a Spirit to help cast an Oakhame Adversary. With nothing left, he passes the turn. Nate untaps and in his upkeep pays to keep his fish around and also loses his Mana Crypt trigger, taking 3 damage. He then plays an island as his land for turn, and with nothing left, passes the turn to Bill. Bill untaps and unfortunately has nothing to do on his turn and has to immediately pass the turn to Adam. Adam untaps, plays a Marsh Flats as his land, and then for a blue mana, casts a Mystic Remora of his own, not paying for Nate's. In response to this, Nate casts a Swan Song, successfully countering the Mystic Remora. Adam then casts a Talisman of Progress for 2 mana, again not paying for Nate's Mystic Remora, but Nate doesn't draw due to Narset. Adam then moves to his end step, and on Adam's end step, Bill casts a Dark Ritual. It resolves and he uses that 3 mana to help cast an Insidious Dreams. As an additional cost, discarding a Villas, Broker of Blood, and a Faithless Looting. It resolves, he searches 2 cards to the top of his library, and then Jordan goes to his turn, untaps, plays a Polluted Delta as his land, and then goes to combat and swings his Oakhame Adversary at Narset for 2 damage. Adam declares no blockers, and Narset takes the damage, and Jordan passes the turn to Nate. Nate untaps and in his upkeep pays to keep his fish around for another turn cycle, and this time wins his Mana Crypt trigger. He then draws a card for turn, and unfortunately with nothing to do, passes the turn to Bill. Bill untaps and starts his turn off by for 0 mana, casting a Mana Crypt, not paying for Nate's Mystic Remora. He then casts a Sensei's Divining Top using 1 of the mana from Mana Crypt, again not paying, but Nate can't draw due to Narset. He then uses the other Mana Crypt mana to activate his top to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library, and satisfied with his turn, he goes to pass the turn to Adam, and on Bill's end step, Adam pays 1 life to crack his Marsh Flats to get a Regrin Triome to the battlefield tapped. Adam then goes to his turn, untaps, and starts his turn by mutating his commander Vadrok onto the bird token that Nate gave him. It resolves, and from the mutate ability, he decides to cast the Mystic Remora from his graveyard, not paying for Nate's Mystic Remora. Nate draws, since it's the first card he's drawn this turn, and he then goes to pass the turn to Jordan, and on Adam's end step, Jordan flashes out a Deceiver Exarch. It resolves, and when it enters the battlefield, he has it tap down Adam's commander. Jordan then goes to his turn, untaps, and goes to combat immediately, swinging Oakhame at Narset. This deals enough damage to take Narset out of the game, and Jordan then passes the turn to Nate. Nate untaps and in his upkeep decides to not pay for fish and lets it go to his graveyard, and wins his Mana Crypt trigger. He then plays a Castle Vantress as his land for turn, and with nothing left, passes the turn to Bill. Bill untaps and in his upkeep wins his Mana Crypt trigger, not taking any damage. He then plays a Swamp as his land for turn, and then taps his mana to cast a Feed the Swarm, targeting Drannith Magistrate and not paying for Adam's Mystic Remora. The Drannith Magistrate is destroyed, Bill loses 2 life, and Bill then casts his commander Kroxa, making each of his opponents discard a card. Adam discards a Dovin's Veto, Jordan a Noxious Revival, and Nate discards an island, taking 3 damage. He then activates Sensei's Divining Top with his floating mana to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library, and with nothing left, he passes to Adam. Adam untaps and in his upkeep pays a mana to keep his Mystic Remora around. He then starts off his turn by casting a Felwar Stone, and then follows that up by casting a Ponder, rearranging the top 3 cards of his library and then drawing a card. He then goes to combat and swings Vadrok at Bill for 3 damage. Bill takes the damage, and Adam, with nothing left, passes the turn to Jordan. Jordan untaps and starts his turn off by casting a Brainstorm. He does not pay for Adam's Mystic Remora, so Adam draws a card. Jordan then goes to combat and swings his Okame adversary at Bill for 2 damage. Bill takes the damage and Jordan draws a card off the Okame, dealing combat damage. In his second main phase, Jordan pays 1 life to crack his Polluted Delta to shock in a Breeding Pool, losing 2 more life. He then casts his commander, Omnath, giving Nate a Spirit from the Forbidden Orchard. In response to this, Adam casts a Mana Drain, attempting to counter the Omnath. In response to this, Jordan for 0 mana casts a Pact of Negation, not paying for Adam's Mystic Remora, so Adam draws a card. The Pact of Negation resolves, the Mana Drain is countered, and Omnath then enters the battlefield and draws Jordan a card. Jordan then plays a Misty Rainforest as his land for turn, triggering Omnath's first landfall ability, gaining 4 life. He then pays 1 life to crack his newly acquired land to shock in a Stomping Ground, losing 2 more life. This triggers Omnath's second landfall ability and gets Jordan 1 of each of his colors to his mana pool. He uses this mana to help cast a Fey Burrow Elder, and with nothing left, he goes to pass the turn to Nate, and on Jordan's end step, Nate taps his mana to cast an Evacuation. He does not pay for Adam's Mystic Remora, so Adam draws a card, and then the Evacuation resolves, bouncing all creatures to their owner's hands. Nate then goes to his turn, untaps, wins his Mana Crypt trigger in his upkeep, and then plays a Buried Ruins as his land for turn. He then taps his mana to cast his commander, Orvar the All-Form, and with nothing left, he passes the turn to Bill. Bill untaps and in his upkeep wins his Mana Crypt trigger, not taking damage. He then starts his turn off by recasting his commander for 2 extra mana, making each of his opponents discard a card. Adam discards a Mystical Tutor, Jordan an Okame adversary, and Nate an Intuition. Bill, with nothing left, passes the turn to Adam. Adam untaps and in his upkeep decides to not pay for Mystic Remora. He then plays a Mystic Sanctuary as his land for turn, and since he has enough islands to trigger its ability, he puts a Force of Will back on top of his library. He then taps for 3 mana to cast a Rhystic Study, and with nothing left, he passes to Jordan. Jordan untaps and in his upkeep immediately retaps for 5 mana to pay for his Pact of Negation trigger. He gives Nate a Spirit when he taps the Forbidden Orchard. He then in his first main phase casts an Avacyn's Pilgrim, not paying for Rhystic Study. Adam draws a card, and Jordan then plays a Verdant Catacombs as his land for turn. With nothing left, Jordan passes the turn to Nate. Nate untaps and in his upkeep loses his Mana Crypt trigger, taking 3. He then plays an island as his land for turn, and then taps his mana to cast an Archaeomancer. He pays for Rhystic Study, and when this creature enters the battlefield, he returns his Swan Song to his hand. He then goes to combat and swings Orvar at Bill for 3 damage. With nothing left, he goes to pass the turn to Bill, and on Nate's end step, Bill pays 1 mana to activate his Sensei's Divining Top to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library. Bill then goes to his turn, untaps, and in his first main phase, again activates his Divining Top to rearrange the top 3 cards. He then casts a Wishclaw Talisman, paying for Rhystic Study. He then goes to pass the turn to Adam, and on Bill's end step, Adam taps his mana to cast a Hull Breacher. The Hull Breacher resolves, and Adam then goes to his turn. On his turn, he untaps, plays an island as his land for turn, and then mutates his commander onto the Hull Breacher. In response to this mutate, Nate casts a Snap, targeting the Hull Breacher. He pays for Rhystic Study, so Adam does not draw, and in response to the Snap, Adam pays 1 life and exiles a Frantic Search from his hand to cast a Force of Will, targeting the Snap. Nate responds to this by, for 1 mana, attempting to cast a Swan Song, trying to counter the Force of Will. He does not pay for Rhystic, Adam draws a card, and then the Swan Song resolves, and the stack then resolves and the Hull Breacher is bounced to Adam's hand. Vadrok then enters as just a regular old creature since the mutate target is gone, and Adam, with nothing left, passes to Jordan. Jordan untaps and starts his turn off by casting a Mana Crypt for 0 mana, but decides to pay an extra mana to pay for Rhystic Study. He then recasts his commander, again paying for Rhystic Study, and in response to this, Adam flashes out his Hull Breacher. Omnath enters the battlefield, and instead of drawing a card, Adam makes a treasure. Jordan then casts his Fey Burrow Elder, giving Nate a Spirit from the Forbidden Orchard, and with nothing left, Jordan passes the turn to Nate. Nate untaps and in his upkeep wins his Mana Crypt trigger. He then uses his Mana Crypt to activate and sacrifice his Buried Ruin to return the Soul Ring from his graveyard to his hand. He then casts the Soul Ring, paying for Rhystic Study, and he then goes to pass the turn to Bill, and on Nate's end step, Bill activates his Sensei's Divining Top to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library. Bill then goes to his turn, untaps, and on his turn pays 4 life and 3 mana to cast a Toxic Deluge. He pays the extra for Rhystic Study, and when it resolves, it wipes the board. Bill then activates his Wishclaw Talisman, tutoring a card to his hand and giving the talisman to Jordan. With nothing left, Bill passes the turn to Adam. Adam untaps and starts his turn off by casting a Talisman of Creativity. He then ends his turn, and on his end step, Jordan pays 1 life to crack his Verdant Catacombs to put a snow-covered forest onto the battlefield. He uses this forest to cast a Natural State, targeting Adam's Rhystic Study, not paying the tax. Adam draws a card and then responds to this by casting a Winds of Rebuke, targeting his own Rhystic Study. The Winds of Rebuke resolves, the Rhystic Study is bounced, and then each player mills 2 cards. Jordan then goes to his turn, untaps, wins his Mana Crypt trigger, and then activates his newly acquired Wishclaw Talisman, tutoring a card to his hand, and decides to give it back to Bill. He then casts a Deceiver Exarch. When it enters the battlefield, he untaps his Mana Crypt. He then taps his mana to cast a Vexing Shusher, and he then casts a Splinter Twin, targeting his Deceiver Exarch. He gives Bill a Spirit from the Forbidden Orchard, and unfortunately, since the Deceiver Exarch has Summoning Sickness, he can't activate it, and he has to pass the turn. On his end step, Nate activates his Castle Vantress to scry 2 cards, scrying them both to the bottom. Nate then goes to his turn, untaps, wins his Mana Crypt trigger in his upkeep, draws a card for turn, and then decides with a win clearly on board that it's best to keep up mana, and passes the turn to Bill. Bill untaps, wins his Mana Crypt trigger in his upkeep, and then starts his turn off by casting a Dockside Extortionist. When the Dockside enters the battlefield, it generates 7 treasures. He then uses these treasures to help cast a Bolas' Citadel. He then taps his Sensei's Divining Top to draw a card and put his Divining Top back on top of his library. He then pays 1 life to cast the Divining Top from the top of his library with the Bolas' Citadel. In response to this, Nate casts a Mental Misstep, targeting the Sensei's Divining Top. In response to the Mental Misstep, Bill activates his Wishclaw Talisman, tutoring a card to his hand and giving the talisman to Adam. Now, just so you know, the Wishclaw Talisman can only be used on your turn, but it isn't relegated to sorcery speed only, so you can use it at instant speed as long as it's your own turn. Bill then, still responding to the Mental Misstep, casts a Red Elemental Blast, targeting the Mental Misstep. In response to this, Jordan activates his Vexing Shusher to make the Mental Misstep uncounterable. This clears the stack, and Bill then, with priority back on his turn, casts a Thrill of Possibility for 2 life from the top of his library, discarding a Magus of the Moon as an additional cost. He then, for 0 mana, casts a Chrome Mox, and when it enters the battlefield, he imprints a Bifrost. He then pays 1 life to cast a Pyroblast off the top of his library, targeting the Deceiver Exarch. The Deceiver Exarch is destroyed, and Bill then plays a Luxury Suite off the top of his library as his land for turn. He then pays 1 life to cast a Reanimate off the top of his library, targeting the Villas in his graveyard. It resolves, and Villas is put onto the battlefield. Bill then loses 8 life from Reanimate, and Bill then draws 8 cards from losing 8 life due to Villas' ability. Bill then pays 3 life to cast a Grim Tutor off the top of his library, drawing 3 cards from that life loss from Villas, tutoring a card to his hand, losing 3 life, and then drawing 3 more cards from the Grim Tutor damage. He then sacrifices his Lotus Petal for a red mana in order to help cast an Underworld Breach. The Underworld Breach resolves, and Bill then casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. He then escapes out the Lotus Petal from his graveyard, exiling 3 cards from his graveyard, and then escapes out a Mana Vault, exiling 3 cards as an additional cost for the escape cost. He then sacrifices his Lotus Petal for a red to cast a Burning Inquiry. In response to this, Adam casts a High Tide for 1 blue mana, taking damage from his Talisman of Progress. In response to this, Bill casts an Insidious Dreams. He discards 3 cards as an additional cost, and in response to this, Nate decides to activate his Castle Vantress to scry 2 cards, scrying them to the bottom. The Insidious Dreams resolves, Bill tutors 3 cards to the tops of his library, the High Tide resolves, Adam gets the High Tide effect for the rest of the turn, and then the Burning Inquiry resolves, and each player draws 3 cards and discards 3 at random. Bill then cracks his LED for 3 black mana, discarding his hand as an additional cost, in order to cast the Animate Dead from his graveyard. He exiles 3 cards in order to escape it out, and when it enters the battlefield, he has it target the Whirlgorger Dragon in his graveyard. With this activated, he now has a loop online. Bill can target his World Gorger Dragon with the Animate Dead. When the World Gorger Dragon enters the battlefield, it'll exile all permanents, including the Animate Dead. When the Animate Dead gets exiled from World Gorger, the World Gorger then dies, since Animate Dead is no longer around. When it dies, the stuff comes back, including Animate Dead, which he can retarget to World Gorger Dragon. He can tap his mana in response to all of these exiles, generating infinite mana. He can then stop this loop by targeting any creature in any graveyard, and now he has his priority on his turn at sorcery speed with infinite mana. With this mana, he can continually recast his commander, causing his opponents to discard their hand, and then eventually take 3 damage when they have nothing to discard, and Bill then wins the game. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. We do hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did like the video, feel free to like the video. And if you're not already, subscribe as well. It really does go a long way to help support the channel. We also want to give a special shout out to our patron supporters. We really do appreciate the support you guys give us, and a lot of this wouldn't be possible without you guys. But like I said, that is all we have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am Joseph. This is Casually Competitive MTG. We hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will see you next time.